Mi fewra níd a gach dúdó. Bhí cuasaí políochta na tíre ina chéar thuail, leis na pártaí políochta i Dublin lena chéile sa dára oltáchan as 3 cín a reachtalfaí in 8,000. An tríú deir seachtainna gan bhí ní ra gá cheist méle phobal, an ma chaí ina híiseach a ríist.
For all their smear campaigns. Go raibh míle maith agam. Thank you very much.
Agus forcanáid, an mach farin rugby na héireann in an corón tríoch a Ghruchtdal I mohor Lansdún gon chéadúid ó níide Carachanaí.
Picks up well, it's curling and it's over!
An níoláideag fewra I murúchhaile mór hawlachta in éhar bhlá clia. Bhí clifa mór rugby an ládar gion intin chuds de Gardaí na háte. In a mask an Garda Patrick Gerard Reynolds ag a ticéad aige. Bhí Patrick nó Gerard mar a thugtaí Somáile 3 bliana fiche díis, agus bhí 3 bliana caite aige I mundúlgaí I dálacht ó dag sé an tample mór. Agus de bhar an bhainte bhí aige le rion na ngluaisrothir, bhí an aine fud na háite
As children, we would have known each other very well, but most of us probably didn't know Gerard in that role. I think maybe the last time I met Gerard was in Dublin. Myself and my sister were up and we met him. He was on the Garda motorcycle and he flashed the lights at us to give us a fright and stopped, and we had a chat, and then it was a great source of amusement because when he decided to leave, eventually the bike wouldn't start, so he got a bit of slagging about that. But I'd say that was probably the only time I met him when he was on duty, the only time I met him when he was a guard.
Dawnella fad about Tallaght le heis áitchúchas Gerard, mac fermóra a tógu marúa chun deichligi, cúpla míle ó bhainisteoir na búile. Dil sé bhaile mór an gach deir seachtaine a bhí saoraige.
Gerard was one of the lads. He was bubbly, bit of crack. There was always a bit of banter. We all chipped in, I suppose, to do our bit on the farm. There's always chores to be done. We'd always have maybe a fallout over some of them, but one fella would be getting it away light, and the other fella he'd have to pull in a bit heavier. But it was a very enjoyable life, there's no doubt about that. Gerard always came home on a regular basis because, again, he enjoyed the fun on the farm and the good family unit. It was always a bit of crack and no better man to join in with it.
Ag lefuéis hían bhaidin hatharann an fichiúla fewra, bhí an Garda Reynolds dúlgas nuair a tháinig gluach an anids chuig an stáisiún. Dúrú gur gníomhaíocht árasach ar bun ag blocáras an áitiúil Avonbeg Gardens.
The sergeant there, Patrick O'Brien, detailed 4 members to travel up to the flat in the patrol car, and they knew that the apartments, their flats there, some of them were vacant. It was an old 1960s style block of apartments with a flat concrete roof, and there were 6 flats in the block.
Ag an nám gur chúis siad amach chun na hárasán a níhasán. Is dóilinn gur híl siad gur rud éigean a bhain le drogannaí nó le mí iompar de chinál éigean eile a bhí ar siúl. Tá bhrí sin ní raibhacha ach na battens, ní a bhéon gunnaí, ní mar a háis emergency response unit náirid mar sin, so Gardaí gan aram chuig amach chuig an tárasán a níhasán.
Éistó blocárasán Avonbeg bhaint amach, chua an Sergeant O'Brien agus an Garda Reynolds timpeall chúl an irignimh. Rinne na Gardaí Quinn agus Kenny a meallach suas a staide á teneachadar go lámh láidir isteach an árasán a tríocha trí.
When they went in to the flat, they were immediately faced with a number of men in the small bathroom there who were standing over a large bag which contained a large quantity of money. They didn't realise that what they had walked into was about 6 or 7 people in the apartment who were heavily armed, and that they had brought back to the flat the proceeds of a bank robbery from County Limerick.
Éiríonn sé stocha cé cho dúr agus cho grúmas an rud. Nar ní réon siad é smuoin, just bheir siad ar a gana duine díobh agus thosaí siad a túirt faoin na Gardaí.
A huge row ensued. During this melee, chief suspect, armed with a revolver, fired 2 shots. The second shot was fired at Garda Kenny and struck his wooden baton, shattering it just above his hand.
Nuair a chola an Garda, an Sergeant O'Brien, agus an Garda Reynolds, we taobh here gan áras an lách son, rishiad chun an príomh choras viidir a gulsús an staire. Nuair a dairdig an Sergeant, don Garda Reynolds, teacht nuas an staire, mar bhí an gunna feiceige.
Ag bar is staire, jumpán Garda Reynolds chun tethe ón bhear gunna. Chonnicus gan Sergeant O'Brien gá orachar as scuile. Lábhacud an Garda Reynolds a dream, agus Mariú go fuilteach an láthire.
Bhí sé récho tapas an dréir dealamh, fiúmán go raibh an piléir in a chort, gur lean sé sais na cosa ag obair mar a déirh ag aibrú, agus é teachsaí an staire go dtí bon an staire san sin hit sé ag bon an staire agus bhí sé marmh ag an buinte son.
The shooting of Garda Reynolds happened at about 1:30 on a Saturday morning. I heard about it shortly afterwards and I immediately alerted one of our cameramen, and we met up at Tallaght and we located Avonbeg Gardens. And I can only say that the hours of darkness turned out to be hours of high drama. Detectives were coming and going with their Uzi submachine guns at the ready. Cars were screeching off into the darkness as the Gardaí went in search of the two men who had escaped from the flats, including the one who had actually killed Garda Reynolds.
The shooting took place in a housing estate in Tallaght. Garda Reynolds left his motorcycle at the station and went with 3 colleagues to investigate a report of suspicious activity at a flat in Avonbeg Gardens. 2 men ran out and 1 fired, hitting Garda Reynolds, who, like his colleagues, was unarmed. Guns and money found inside are being linked to a bank robbery in Eskeaton, County Limerick, thought to be the work of the INLA. The death of Garda Reynolds here in Tallaght brings to 4 the number of Gardaí shot dead in the course of their duty in the past 2 years, and his death is almost certain to lead to pressure on the incoming government to retain the death penalty for such murders.
Bhí deireadh seachtain a rugby crack agus cólúdar Avonbeg Gerard lena chláán, ach ina áit bullawíad leis an trumlaí is trimme atá an.
Rugby was going well at the time and Ireland was playing the Triple Crown on the Saturday. So a number of lads here locally and myself headed to Dublin on the Friday evening. Had arranged with Med with Gerard to meet him up and a few more the following day to travel to the match. That Friday night we stayed out in Drumcondra, I think it was, and looking forward to the match. Of course, the next day, a number was going, a bit of fun and banter. And the next morning I discovered that he was involved in a serious incident in Tallaght the previous night. And then later on in the day I discovered that he was fatally injured.
I was actually sitting at work and we were all tuned into the radio because there were election results coming up, and we heard the headline that a guard had been shot, so everybody stopped dead just to listen to the details. And I heard the name Garda Patrick Reynolds, which actually meant nothing really, because I had known him as Gerard during our childhood and all along. And then the address was given as Boyle, and I remember getting this horrible sinking feeling that there were not maybe 2 Garda Reynoldses based in Tallaght who were from Boyle. And like everybody, I rang home, and yes, they told me the awful news that it was in fact Gerard who had been shot dead.
Rinne Tishmahori Kratza and Garda Reynolds and Tashter Wignach go blach lia.
To go on cart with your shape hill round Targus across the Narrels. A Humradi had Dalucht, a Quaffing Gondra. The Ahead is a Wahid, a Yahard Jahar, Agus Igraford, a Lahid.
Halahar Colty, Glushruhur and Garda Sheikhana, Garda Onura, da Gumradi Maruf.
Léiríonn sé an scéal faoin Garda Síochána an cinál duine a hensisteach nó heachaisteach sa Garda Síochána, mac feramóra, clán feramóra. Léirú is tóla mar an cuigar sé job gur an scórtha blá lascaní ó bhaintear hádachta féin. Bhí na mílte litre agus telegrama feite an bláán, agus cumáile sin bhí sé geanta le chalín banaltra ó hirón mar a Harlín sé, agus bhí sé, bhí sé annach rúm ar fad, bhí rós a bháin darag ar an gcónra agus an gcónra gáil siar go dtí chun é slígach áitin ar cuireaché.
It was from Mount Argus he came. It was a long journey down, bad roads sometimes as well. It was definitely an unusual sight for this area.
Every time a tragedy happens, you hear people on the news saying it's not what we expect to happen in our area, and certainly not in an area like this. The huge funeral, the Garda presence, all the politicians. And you saw his colleagues, other young guards on bikes. It's a very dramatic, stark sort of an image. I think it added to the sense of unreality. Nobody could actually believe this was happening.
Your parents never expect to bury one of their kids, but it happens, and my parents were very close to us all. When it did happen, there's no doubt you could see it in them from that till the day they both died, that they found it very hard to get over. Or never did get over, I wouldn't think, no.
Today, we profess our unbounded admiration for the heroism of the Gardaí. In these days of violence and robberies, every Garda who answers a call such as that of last Saturday morning knows that he is laying his life on the line.
Well, the initial reaction, both personally and across the whole force, was one of outrage that such a tragedy had occurred, that an unarmed member of the Garda Síochána could be shot down and killed in such a fashion. When you hear of it, the next thing you ask is, I wonder who carried out this. But very quickly, the intelligence sections within the organisation were able to identify the Irish National Liberation Army as the organisation that had carried it out. Now, the INLA was an organisation that was set up in the mid-70s, and young men from Belfast and around the country joined it. It wasn't a big organisation, but it was a very violent and volatile and unpredictable organisation. It had within it some strange peoples, from pseudo-intellectuals to rejects from other organisations, terrorist organisations.
The INLA issued a statement denying any involvement in the murder of Garda Reynolds, or indeed in the robbery at Askeaton in County Limerick. They blamed it on what they called reject members of the organisation, but I don't think anybody believed them. The Gardaí circulated the descriptions of several people they wanted to interview in connection with the shooting. Now, top of the wanted list was an INLA man from Belfast called Sean Bap Hughes. He was nicknamed Bap because he had a tattoo with the letters BAP, which it was said meant Browning automatic pistol. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but the fact was that Bap Hughes had disappeared. And it wasn't until the following November that the Gardaí were informed by the French police that he'd been spotted in Paris.
I mean the sound needs a gachú dó, chuan Sergeant O'Brien agus rinsta cholachaithe go Paris. Bhí sé socrí ag údarás na Franca, gníonadí sin Taurasi, a chreidir a chonig siad a dálacht ar niche cinneannach agus a bhí inis chur faoise gathead a aithins go neamh ar Malta.
De réir dealar bhí MI5 i Paris, agus cumáile sin Paulini na Franca i cinál súil ar Sean Hughes. Agus gur chuir siad ólas chun na Gardaí an sa tír seo, gur híl siad gur an fearr sa ann. Chuig na Gardaí an faoi ró agus an dara uair gur chuir siad an, tháinig siad an fearr áirithe sa i Rue Amsterdam, Gardan Gar, Saint-Lazare, agus dúirdar le Paulina Franca sin é Sean Hughes.
And as a result of their evidence of identification, the authorities back home lodged an application with the French authorities for the extradition of Hughes for the capital murder of Garda Patrick Reynolds. The extradition procedure turned out to be very tedious. It rumbled on, in fact, until 1987, 5 years after the killing. And at the end of the day, the French court refused the application on the basis that the capital punishment was still on the statute books in Ireland, even though it wasn't being implemented at that time.
Tá sé sais at bhí fuair an dlí anlóidir ag Sean Hughes ar an iartas sin, agus de réir dalirh níor thuaig aine ar th ceann an stáit seo in 1954 chur an duine dearna combás. Agus níl sé soléir dún ar hiig an cuairtéis sin sa rank ar chuircéis sin go láidir os cór an cuairt gur cé go raibh an bailán go teoracúil, go practicúil na bhéin ceist go gurfií Sean Hughes in Mail an Bháis. Agus go bhéid fí undertaking a chur a raig dá meid gá leis, nach gur fí combás é. Níl sé solar gur háir leis é sin, agus níl sé solar gur bhéin ifige gán chuné sin a bhíú don cuairt sa rank.
Hep ar an seachada, agus in iad ó rion sama chatha I brís an Francach go bhfuair pas bréige a bheith na helleveige, díbriú Sean Hughes thar cún amach, agus ar dalrah thug sé ai ar an Afric. Chréad muinte Reynolds gur a deire take le fistrachán marithe a ní a thuir Gerard. Gomach maid an haura in 1997 I mé asa chun de wio, chonnicus den Noel Canavan, Garda nachra ar dúte, cár á farcail go heisteach ag fear ard cuil a chuisteach amach na héireann. Níor bheith a warú leid. Thula an Garda orachar á scuile, agus nuair a tháinig an rubalí bain amach, thug sé faoi le cabhair tábhairneora.
The man had ran out of the bank, and there was a car parked skewways like a getaway car just where that car is parked there. And just in a flash, I was a little bit behind here, and just in a flash, Noel flashed out of there and grabbed him. He basically knocked him into the car, and at that stage I just got in with him and we were grappling with the man. He was wriggling about an awful lot and trying to get his hand inside his jacket and all this type of thing. I had him in a headlock from very early on. He wasn't going to really get away.
Tháinig Gardaí anheartaithe ar an láthair, agus tugadh rubalí bheith lesa chuig stáisiún na Gardaí I méileach na muice, áit sa tosaí ó a chuardach agus á cheistú. Ní cheoradh an príosannach aon sonraí persanta gan na Gardaí, a tháinig áras orú nuair a chonig siad tatúna ar a lábha na litricha BAP in the mask. Bhí siad ar an ranse speisialta an lá clia, agus beargar hiag siad nach aon gná príosannach a bhí ar lábh acu.
Is tóca gur trí himpist a gabhach air I Foxford in san rubalí bank sin agus tám cinnte an uair choluas a hiag na Gardaí cé a bhí acu, cé bhí gafa acu go raibh iontas ortha agus na tattoos ar fad agus nach go nóir rubalí bank a bhí an, so cai go raibh iontas ortha nóir hiagtar go raibh taca acu trí himpist ar Sean Hughes a bhí idir á lárag le chuig bliain deganús.
I was surprised, and when I got the phone call in my office, I thought to myself, what strange circumstances. And that here's a man that was top of the wanted list. Last heard of heading for Africa out of France in 1988, and involved in his own as an armed bank robber of the Bank of Ireland in Foxford. I was very pleased when I heard it, because I said, now this man can be put before the courts to deal with what happened 15 years before that.
16 years after the 23-year-old Garda Patrick Reynolds was shot dead while searching a house in Tallaght, a man has been charged with his murder. 40-year-old Sean Bap Hughes is already serving 8 years in Portlaoise prison after he was convicted last year of robbing £3,000 from the Bank of Ireland in Foxford in County Mayo. Today, however, he was brought from the prison to the Special Criminal Court in Dublin to face 8 charges, including one of capital murder.
Thosa an tríal sa chóirt chorúil speisialta, agus ní ra se bhád gur a bollacaite, nuair deireadh le fuireann drí Hughes argons láidir a dhéanamh baca chur le húsáid fianaise aitheantais fáras. Riala an chóirt I bhábhar Hughes.
Dag sin gur a trí sais fianaise fáca in aig Hughes. Bhí spéirtláirí in san árasán gur gur híldína gur spéachláirí Hughes iad, ach dúirt na brehef, well déach na spéachláirí a bheith ann, bheith curtha ann, ach ní honan san is rá gur lách sé an Garda. Chomáile sin bhí lorg méir in san áras an, dúirt siad an rud chéna.
So deire an méid a bhí fáca ná an fianaise ahantais a thug an Gord O'Brien.
But I have no doubt whatsoever that that is the man.
He had no doubt about it. He had been at the back of the flats with Garda Reynolds, and then when they heard the shooting in the flats, Garda Reynolds had run up the stairs. At this stage, Sergeant O'Brien had come round to the front and he was looking up at the first floor landing. He saw the confrontation, he saw the gunman in the halogen light above him, and he saw him shooting his colleague in the back. And he had no doubt that it was the gunman was Sean Bap Hughes, and he pointed to him in the dock. He said, "That's Hughes, and that's the man who killed my colleague."
Are you sure there was enough light to get a good view of the gunman?
I was looking directly at them, my lords. I had a full facial view of them, straight on.
Tá sé fear dachar don cuairt lacha le fianaise ahantais 8 bliain déag in dhé an rud a tharla. Is tócha má chuimhnín tuaireann sin trí seo dá me an Paddy O'Brien tar éis rá, well an ihe dahan mé an duine seo is córsa béal ar é nó den éigeanna dimmer pelle má bhacé dahan mé an duine. Agus an sin 8 bliain déag níos déanaí dearann sé, well sin an duine céine a tháinig mé an ihe sin rud amháin. Rud éagsúil ar fad é a rá, tháinig mé duine ar feadh cúpla second, bhí sé doracha, bhí mé héin faoi bhrú, bhí an duine ag scaoile ar chorlam, bhí gona aige, bhí má comréid tite chun talamh, agus tá sé 8 bliain déag ó hin. Ghlach siad leis go raibh Paddy O'Brien omlán macánta, gur chreid sé héin go raibh an duine céine, gur chreid sé féin go raibh sé chorahantar, ba bhí sé fear dachar das na bretheh ghlacha lei sin, gan éon fianaise sa bhreis leis, gan éon rud le chur leis, ghlacha lei sin chun duine a cúisiú, I rud cótram cúiseach le dúnmharú de Garda sin an chur istram cúisií atá againn.
Today, at the Special Criminal Court, Sean Hughes was found not guilty on all charges. Afterwards, his wife said he shouldn't have been before the court in the first place.
Glad justice was done, and because he didn't do anything, he shouldn't have been there.
Gintiu Sean Bap Hughes as Maru and Garda Patrick Gerard Reynolds, agus still she Efrison Fort Leisha, outside she fos fi fienvre the Rubal Velasa. Mean Yishin Squilu Sira fi Herme Hoentuina Hesta. A chur glunder a chud takahori. Dag sé seo, Clán Reynolds agus na Gardaí sa mé ar na Bail.
Obviously there was disappointment within the Garda Síochána, but Garda Síochána is a professional body, and we all know the rules, and you know, we've seen things like this happen before, but at the end of the day you have to have the sufficient evidence for the court, and that's the way it is.
Seas cos é a bhí an dachar dus na cuairteanna plé leis stocha go dtí an gachéine an rátas úsáidtear deirtar go minic é justice delayed is justice denied, mar bí ní bhí na cuimhneáin géir go leor, agus tá sé fear dachar cos na mar sin a ré, tá sé fear dachar duine chur tríal 8 bliain in níomh de chur a thorlúnt.
Brunú bun or Scott Hishmahori and Garda Reynolds in Níd agachú trí. Bhí rathir Frank a bhí na Garda hain faoin amseo I láthir ag a searmanas. In aion go rathanta sé an gradam Ebert's Gerard son an stát is Malamór fós a bhás dá winter.
It was a very hard knock. It was a very hard knock for my parents, surely, because it's something parents never want to do, is to bury one of their own. Parents never got over it, but even the other family members, it was a struggle. Always will be.
Gerard was an ordinary country boy who came from a beautiful, quiet lakeside community. The kind of person who never expected anything bad to happen, least of all to himself. It makes the rest of us realise that there are dangers, and these people do literally put their lives on the line, and they just literally don't know from day to day what's around the corner. And yeah, I think that was brought home to all of us around here then.
here was a young man of 23 years who bled to death as a consequence of being shot while carrying out his duty in a proper fashion with his colleagues on that particular night. He was a fine, upstanding member of the Garda Síochána, and it's a sad way for a young man to lose his life in the service of the state.